he eats a slug. Not because he had to. Not because it was some apocalyptic jungle ritual. No, a dare. The sentence every Darwin Award story begins with. Sam Ballard, a 19-year-old Australian, sees a slug crawling across the patio. Someone says, "Bet you won't." He does. And suddenly his life isn't a coming-of-age film anymore. It's a Discovery Channel documentary, complete with sad music and Latin terminology. Because what he ate wasn't a protein snack, but the biological embodiment of the sentence. I should have listened to my mom. The slug carried a parasite of the rat lungworm. Yes, that's its real name. Sounds like a bad 80s metal band, but it's actually worse. Sam, 19, rugby player, healthy, popular. Just an evening with friends, beer, barbecue, dares. This slug was a Trojan horse made of mud, filled with a parasite called Angiostrongylus cantonensis. The creature normally lives in rats, and when a human gets a stupid idea, it suddenly ends up in a brand new Airbnb. Your brain. And it feels right at home. Very much so. Because this thing travels through your nervous system, as if it had a guidebook. First the spinal cord, then the brain, then everything that matters. While you're thinking, my neck hurts, the parasite is chilling there like a tourist on a work and travel trip. Sam soon fell into a coma. A single bite, and his life froze. From haha, I'll do it, to he'll never walk again. And yes, that's tragic, but also symbolic, because it shows that death doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes all it takes is a slug and a dumb bet to prove that evolution knows progress but has no sense of humor. What happened to Sam is officially called a tragedy. Unofficially, it's called a textbook example of natural selection with Wi-Fi access. Because while doctors were fighting for his life, the internet was fighting for the best comment. Everyone suddenly felt like an expert in biology and irony. Well, Darwin Award 2018 goes to should have just eaten salad. Snails aren't snacks, bro. And somewhere in between sits a man in a wheelchair, paralyzed because he wanted to belong. That's the real parasitic part of all this. Not the worm, but the culture that makes such dares seem sexy. Dares aren't adventures anymore, they're content. Not who's brave enough, but who's brave enough for views. The dare is the primitive brother of the algorithm. Both reward stupidity with attention. Both demand sacrifices, and both only stop when someone dies. And even then, just briefly until the next viral video comes along. We laugh at the guy who ate a slug, but we do the same thing, only digitally. We feed our own parasites likes, retweets, reactions. They crawl into our dopamine centers and settle in there until we too start swallowing stupid things for attention. Sam ate a slug. We consume disinformation, toxic comments every day and call it discourse. He died from a parasite in his body. We live with parasites in our heads, and that's the bitter part of it. Sam wanted to belong, and he wanted to laugh, to be part of the group. And in the end, he became the example of what happens when peer pressure becomes literally deadly. So, yes, he didn't just die because a slug poisoned him, but because we live in a world where saying no thanks is often more embarrassing than death. Now imagine the whole thing as a Pixar movie. Title, Rat Lungworm, a parasite on the loose. The trailer starts with cheerful music. A little snail crawls through the grass, humming. Cut to a rat coughing charmingly, and then zoom in on the worm. Voice of Danny DeVito. I want more out of life. More nerves, more brain, more adventure. Cut to Australia. A boy picks up the snail. The worm, yes, world tour. And suddenly we're in a body comedy, one nobody ever booked. The parasite moves in, gets comfortable, lights a campfire in the CNS, and the immune system stands there like security at a bad festival. That name's not on the list. But the worm stays. It plays Twister with your synapses, dances on your sense of balance, and hangs selfies in your brain. And you slowly realize, maybe that bet wasn't such a great idea after all. That's the tragic thing about parasites. They're pure chaos in miniature form. They're like terrible roommates. Move in, pay no rent, and in the end kill you just because you were too polite to say no. But the worst part? They have no plan, no hate, no intent. The worm didn't want to kill, it just wanted to live. Like a backpacker who checked into the wrong hostel. And that's what makes it so cruelly funny. If you get eaten by a shark, okay, nature. If you die from a parasite that accidentally dismantles your brain, that's not nature anymore, that's Monty Python under a microscope. They say humans are the crown of creation, but honestly, if that crown can be hijacked by a worm, maybe it wasn't attached very well. And in the end, only this bizarre irony remains. A young man dies not from cancer, not from war, not from anything epic, but because he once said, "wanna bet," too loudly. That's not a tragedy in the classical sense. It's a tragic comedy, written by the universe itself. With the moral, if you think it's just fun, check first if it's a parasite. Because as absurd as it all sounds, like it's almost symbolic for our time. We've learned that stupidity can be dangerous, but we keep confusing it with courage. We call it joy of life when we cross boundaries and fate when it goes wrong. Sam Ballard became a warning, but not in the way schools tell it. His name is now used as a punchline in TikToks, as a sad hashtag on Reddit, as a reminder that the internet only knows compassion in 24-hour cycles. But maybe there's a kind of honesty in that too. Because that's how humanity works. We laugh at what scares us. We make memes about death because otherwise we'd have to scream. So yeah, it sucks to die from a parasite. Because it reminds us how thin the line between life and coincidence really is. One breath, one bite, one joke too far. And you know what's the bitterest part? That Sam Ballard didn't die from the snail in the end, but from us. From that global reflex to turn every tragedy into entertainment. Because while he lay in the hospital years later, people were still posting jokes. Jokes about a guy who wanted to show courage and lost everything for it. We love to say that parasites are horrible, but let's be honest. No worm on Earth spreads as fast as mockery. No organism drains energy as efficiently as a society. That trades empathy for entertainment, and that's exactly why it sucks. To die from a parasite. Because in the end, you don't know. Which one got you first? The one in your body or the one in the comments? Don't make bets you can't digest. And somewhere out there, a snail is laughing.